All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and, honestly, mind-bending ideas in the entire history of philosophy. It's this incredible thought experiment that's been captivating thinkers for literally thousands of years.
So think about this for a second. What if your entire reality, everything you see, everything you hear, everything you believe is real, what if it wasn't the whole story? What if it was just, a flickering shadow of some deeper, truer reality? That's the huge, kind of terrifying question the ancient Greek philosopher Plato wants us to wrestle with. To get his point across, Plato tells this incredible story. He asked us to imagine this really strange, dark world. This is the setup for his famous allegory of the cave, which you can find in his major work, The Republic.
Okay, so picture this. There's this deep, dark cave. And inside, there's a group of people who have been stuck there their entire lives, since birth. And they're not just hanging out, they are chained up, totally unable to move, can't even turn their heads to look around. Yeah, so their necks and legs are chained in such a way that they can only stare at the blank stone wall right in front of them. That's it. Now, behind them, there is a big fire burning. And between that fire and the prisoners, people are walking back and forth holding up all sorts of objects. The fire casts the shadows of these objects onto the wall. And here's the crazy part. For these prisoners, the shadows are the real objects. They don't know any different. And when they hear echoes bouncing around the cave, they're convinced the sounds are coming from the shadows themselves. I mean, this is their entire universe. So you got to get this. For these prisoners, the shadows on the wall aren't like reality. They are reality. It's not a metaphor for them. It's the real deal. They have zero other frames of reference. They've never seen a real tree, a real animal, only the flat, flickering shadow of one. Their entire world is this two-dimensional illusion, and they're completely clueless.
But then, something happens. Everything changes. Plato says, okay, now what if one of these prisoners is suddenly set free? What if the chains just whoop, fall away? And let me tell you, this journey out of the dark is not easy. It's actually pretty brutal. The first thing that happens is he turns around and is just painfully blinded by the fire he never even knew was there. If you tried to show him a real object like an actual book, he wouldn't believe you. He'd argue that the shadow was the more real version. Then he gets dragged, not walks, but dragged out of the cave and into the sunlight. And it's just overwhelming, blinding. But slowly, his eyes start to adjust, and he begins to see the true shapes and colors of the world. Real trees, real animals, a world in 3 dimensions. Eventually, he can even look up towards the sun, and he has this massive realization. The sun is the source of everything. It's what creates the seasons, the years, and makes everything he's seeing visible.
And right then, it hits him, this profound, earth-shattering realization. His entire life before this, his whole understanding of the world, it was all an illusion. Back in the cave, they probably had little games, right? Guessing which shadow would appear next. The praise, the honors they got for being good at that game, he now sees it was all completely meaningless. He knows the truth now, and there is no way he could ever go back to being that ignorant. Okay, so this is a great story, but it's not really about prisoners in caves, is it? No. Plato is using this entire allegory as a way to explain one of his biggest, most important, and honestly most radical ideas, what he called the theory of forms. So Plato basically believed that reality exists on 2 different levels. First, you have the visible world. That's the world we see and touch and experience with our senses every day. But he said that's not the realist reality. Above that, there's an intelligible world. This is a realm of perfect, eternal, unchanging ideas or concepts, which he called the forms. So think about the perfect idea of a circle, or the perfect concept of justice or beauty. These perfect forms, he argued, exist in this higher reality, and all the stuff we see in our world, they're all just flawed, imperfect copies of those perfect forms.
And that right there is the key to the whole allegory. The cave? That's our physical, visible world. It's full of those imperfect, shadowy copies that we perceive with our senses. And the world outside the cave? That represents the intelligible world, the true, eternal reality of the forms, which you can't see or touch, but you can grasp with your mind, with reason. So, this whole idea of 2 different worlds, it leads Plato to a pretty radical conclusion about what it means to truly know something. Basically, for Plato, if you learn something just by using your senses, seeing it, hearing it, that's not real knowledge. Nope, it's just opinion. Think back to the prisoners. They thought they knew what a book was, right? But they were only seeing a shadow. So all they had was an opinion about the book, not real, true knowledge of what a book is.
So how do we get to real knowledge then? Well, Plato's answer is through philosophical reasoning. That freed prisoner, he's the symbol for the philosopher, the person who turns their back on the illusions of the senses and uses their mind, their intellect, to chase after and try to understand the true forms.
Okay, I get it. A story that's, 2,400 years old, about prisoners and shadows, it can feel a little out there. But if you're sitting there thinking, this whole thing sounds really familiar, well, you are 100% right.
That's because this ancient thought experiment got a massive, modern, blockbuster sci-fi makeover. That's right, The Matrix. The entire movie is basically a modern retelling of Plato's allegory of the cave. You've got all of humanity trapped inside a simulated reality, The Matrix, mistaking the digital shadows of a computer world for the real thing. And then you have a few philosopher heroes like Neo who break free from their chains, so to speak, and see the terrifying, true reality of the world outside.
And that brings this whole thing right back to us, doesn't it? It forces us to ask ourselves the exact same question Plato wanted people to think about thousands of years ago. It really makes you wonder about the limits of your own perceptions. What about our beliefs, our culture? Are they the real world, or just shadows we've gotten used to? So I'll leave you with that one big question to chew on. What shadows are you still watching on the wall?